All right, so this is going to be a quick lesson covering skill 1 from the first unit of Algebra 1. Before I start, let me say that the skills contained in the first unit are intended to be a review of material covered in middle school. So some of it will seem like a review and probably seem really easy. But I'm going to make sure I cover everything so you guys kind of have that foundation. So the first lesson is all about these categories of numbers. So I'm going to kind of draw a diagram here to get us into the mindset we need to be. So the smallest, kind of most simple group of numbers is what we call natural numbers. Natural numbers are like 1, 2, 3, and so on. They are the counting numbers. They're called natural because it's kind of the idea here is that this is what you would naturally arise just in life. You would need to have a count of things. Outside of natural numbers, you have the next category, which is called whole numbers. Whole numbers include natural numbers, and the only additional part is going to be the number 0. So the number 0, I'm actually going to erase that 0 because it's kind of messy. The number 0 is a concept that isn't going to come at first, but as you get into numbers, you need a number to represent nothing. And so we have whole numbers, which include 0. The next category is going to add another group of numbers. You can notice all of the other numbers we've covered so far are contained within this group, and that is what we call integers. Integers are going to be all the negative counting numbers on top of the positive counting numbers and 0. So now we have negative versions of all of our natural numbers. All right. So what you'll notice about all of these so far is that they are complete numerical values, 1, 2, 3, or negative 1, 2, 3, and of course 0. So the next group of numbers, again, includes all the numbers that come before, is what we call rational. Rational comes from the word ratio, and a ratio is just another word for a fraction. So rational numbers are any numbers that can be written as a fraction. So these would just be a few examples. And notice when I say a fraction, I mean they're a fraction made up of numbers that appear up here. So 2/3 would be a ratio of 2 and 3. Negative 1/5 would be a ratio between 1 and 5, or negative 1 and 5. So rational numbers would be the next group outside of that. And then we have a term for all the numbers that don't fit in this rational category. And they actually come over here on their own. And they are called irrational. Irrational numbers are not any of the numbers we've covered so far, and they are not able to be written as fractions. They are numbers such as pi and other mathematical constants, and things like the square root of 3, or the square root of numbers that are not whole. So for instance, we know that here, for instance, the square root of 25 would be a natural number. It is a square root, but we know the square root of 25 is 5. And so that's why 25 would appear under natural numbers. But irrational numbers cannot be written as a ratio of any of these numbers, and they are not any of the numbers in here. All of this entire page that you see in front of you all fall under a single category. So let me just outline this. And that category is called real numbers. So real numbers include everything we've covered so far. And you're probably thinking, well, if there's real, is there something that falls outside of real? And in fact, there is. So we'll just put a little box over here. Oh, let me change the color on that. And we'll call this group over here, this group is called imaginary. You don't need to worry about that right now, but you will as you go further in math. You'll encounter these numbers. And they are numbers that include this number I, which you don't need to worry too much about that right now. But just so you're aware, all numbers that we deal with in mathematics are going to be contained within what you see here. So let me scroll down and let's take a couple examples. In the unit, they give you a set of numbers and they ask you, where does this fall? So for instance, it might ask us, let's say we have this set of numbers. Okay. So we have this set of numbers, -1, 0, 3, and 8. And we might want to know what categories do these numbers fall in? Well, we'd want to start from the outermost. So is it imaginary or real? Well, they are all real numbers. They are all rational numbers because they could be written as fractions. They are all integers. But they are not all whole numbers because of this -1 right here. It is not a whole number. So we would stop here, and that would be our answer for that set. So if it asked us, what is this set of number, real, rational, integers, we would know it falls under the categories of real, rational, and integers, but it's not a whole number. They are not all natural numbers. And so most of the questions in the unit are going to do that. One thing I should say about imaginary numbers, another way of writing this number I is basically to say any number that is the square root of a negative number. So anytime you have a square root of a negative, it falls under the imaginary category. So take a look at the sets of numbers that appear in the questions, and that should be everything you need to answer those questions. But just to review, natural numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Whole numbers are those numbers with 0 as well. Integers are all of those numbers with the negatives. Rational numbers are all of those numbers and anything that can be written as a fraction. Irrational numbers are numbers like pi and square roots that are not simplified. And then, of course, those fall under the real category, and then imaginary or anything that has a square root of a negative or the I.